Good morning everyone. Welcome to the course Disability Studies in India, Historical, Social and Cultures Perspective. So in this module, we are going to talk about theories and models of disability. So far I just introduced what disability studies is. I also introduced the definition of certain key terms that are associated with disability. We also discussed how disability studies evolved. Alright, so in this module, I am going to make a shift from what disability studies is to what are the theories that we think upon, that we deploy upon to understand the dynamics of disability. And also we are going to talk about models of disability. So far, you see that people only talk about certain specific model, medical model as you are aware, social model as you are aware. But in this lecture, I am not going to just name the models of disability. I am also going to talk about what are the problems associated with those models of disability. What are the characteristics of those models of disabilities and what is disability in relation to that model. So let's say for example, if you pick up that one particular model, according to that model what disability is going to be, and the moment you make a shift to another model, disability becomes something else. Now you can relate, you can understand that how rich and dynamic disability is. Alright. So as the lecture proceeds, you will see I'll uncover each and every models of disabilities, their problems, their key characteristics, and end of the lecture you will notice that what kind of a model as a disability scholar we should look at. So here comes the first slide where I am talking about medical model of disability. So disability actually is conceptualized through various model, and it depends the model that you choose. Accordingly, you are going to define the nature, you are going to define the cause, you are going to define the impact of disability on people and society. So these models, whether they are medical, they are social, they are shaping how society understands disability, how society influences policies, how these affect the lived experiences of disabled people. So each model reflects different perspectives, ideologies and values which has evolved over time to respond to changing societal norms and attitudes. So medical model views disability primarily as a physical or mental condition that resides within the person. So according to the medical model, disability is a personal attribute of the body, which means that it is the body which is responsible, to the person which is responsible for the condition in which they are in. So for medical model of disability, it is a problem. Disability is a problem that needs to be fixed or cured through medical intervention. So since there is a problem, there is some problem with the person, and through the medical intervention it has to be cured, it has to be fixed, the problem that it has. So this model also focuses on diagnosing, treating and managing the individual's impairment to make them conform to societal norms. So the idea behind the medical model is that there is a problem with your body, and now medical intervention, through the medical intervention your body will be ready to comply with societal norms. So medical model tends to see disabled people as a passive recipient of a care, which means to say that it is the problem which is with the body and therefore they need a care, and the care will be designed and defined by the medical institutions, not by the person, right. So this is an interesting argument through the medical model of disability. What are the key characteristics? First, through the medical model, if you are looking at the body through the medical model, it only means that disability is a deficiency, it's a kind of abnormality within the body. There is a focus on medical diagnosis. There is a focus on treatment. It also reinforces the idea that disabled people are in need of a care or rehabilitation, right? It implies, medical model suggests that they need care and rehabilitation. And the role of society is to provide medical solution, not to change its own structure, right? So here the point is that you are not supposed to change the structure, because there is problem does not lie in the structure, problem lies in the body, right? So body has to work on to fit into that structure. Moving to the criticism of that model, unfortunately, when we are looking at the medical model, it ignores the social, economic and environmental factors that contribute to the challenges faced by disabled people, right? So what it does not take into the account the problem that disabled body encounters because of the environmental barriers, and it also reinforces the stigma by positioning disabled people as broken or abnormal, because the moment you look at the body, you think that there is something wrong with the body which has to be fixed and cured by the medical intervention. You don't understand that each and every body is different. You don't understand that there is something more about the diversity of the body. You do not realize that there is a environment that create that problem. So what it does, it positions disabled people as a broken or abnormal, and it also sidelines the lived experiences and agency of disabled people, right? It does not take into the account what they are going to talk about. As the lecture proceeds, I'll show you some also videos, I will show you certain clips where you will see that disabled body have a very different way to look at and can think about the society, but through the medical model, they all are sidelined, they all are not taken into the account, right? And there is a prioritizing the expertise of medical professionals. So personal account is not taken into the consideration, but medical intervention comes into the forefront, all right? Moving from the medical model of disability, we are switching to social model of disability, right? So what it does, social model, I would say this is dialectically opposite what medical model suggests, right? So the social model, according to the social model, disability is not an inherent trait of the people, but it is a social construct that arises from environmental and societal barriers. So for social model, it's like structure, there is infrastructure of the society is governed by the ableist assumption. It is more helpful to the so-called certain abled body, not the disabled body. So because of that structure which is created keeping in the mind the body which is able, disabled body face a problem. So according to this model, what we see that people are disabled not by their impairments, right, but by social structure which tends to exclude and marginalize them. So this model is looking for societal change. It asks us to remove those barriers so that disabled people can fully participate, right? So what social model does, it ignores completely medical model and it says that the onus is on the society. Society is a problematic, infrastructure is a problematic, because every way of, like let's say for example, there is a building designed, it is designed by keeping in the mind how it would be accessible to the so-called able body, and which is why disabled body face a problem. If it is designed through the perspective of disabled body, then there won't be any problem. So this is an important concern that was raised by social model of disability. So let's look at the key characteristics of social model of disability. So here disability is seen as a result of social barriers. Let's say for example, inaccessible environment, you see discrimination, you see inadequate policies, right? So the focus is on changing societies rather than fixing the person, right? As I had already explained that you are supposed to work on changing the society, not the fixing the person. So, emphasis is more placed on right, equality and conclusion, right? Inclusion is very important aspect. So, people are not included because of the societal barriers, people are not getting equally participation because of the society is not constructed keeping in the mind disabled bodies, and also they are deprived of certain rights because, right, because there is a problem with society's infrastructure. All right. Moving ahead to the criticism, as usual, unfortunately, social model blames society completely. It does not also take into the account the limitations of people with certain impairments. They do not, social model does not take into the account the pain that disabled body goes through. So, it can sometimes minimize the need for medical or rehabilitation support. Let us say for example, if you argue from the social point of view, so people will not look at the personal experiences, people will not see what personal need you want, right? They will say now there is a society where is accessible for everyone, now you access it, but again there will be a problem. So, what it does not take into the account the personal experiences, the personal problems, personal limitations of people with disabilities. So, the model has been criticized for being overly simplistic in its binary opposition to medical model, right? And third, we have biopsychosocial model of disability, right? So, the biopsychosocial model of disability attempts to integrate both. It argues for, it imbibes, it brings together both medical as well as social model, right? By considering biological, psychological and social factors to understand disability. So, it does not only take account the social understanding of disability, but it also takes into the account biological, psychological understanding as well. So, disability arises from a very complex interaction between health condition, like it accepts that there is something with the body as well, and it also acknowledges the societal environment. So, there is a basically very complex interaction between these two, like health conditions, biological, which I am saying, and the personal, psychological and societal environment. So, the key characteristics of this is that disability is understood as a dynamic interaction between people's health condition and their environment. It accounts for medical factor as well as personal and social influences, and it also promotes a very holistic approach to disability management, emphasizing both rehabilitation and social change. So, the criticism of this model is that it argues that model can dilute the strong political stance of the social model by not fully confronting societal operations. So, it may still rely heavily on medical perspectives and can potentially pathologize disability, right. So, the problem with this model is that it is somewhere dilutes the strong political stance which was taken by the social model. So, there is a possibility that if you take this model, you are relying upon medical intervention, and therefore, the full encounter to societal operation may not be executed. So, which is why there is a problem with this model where you are where this has a potentiality to pathologize disability. Moving ahead, we have a human rights model of disability, and human rights model frames disability as an issue of fundamental human rights. It asserts that disabled people should enjoy the same rights and freedom as people. It seeks to promise the dignity, autonomy and self-determination of disabled people, and advocates for inclusive policies and legal framework that protects these rights. So, as the name itself defines, right, human right model, which means to say that everyone is equal, everyone has, since everyone is a human, they have a right to have all the facilities, legal remedies provided to everyone. So, even disabled people can have those remedies as well, those legal access as well, right. So, this model is strongly vouch for promoting the dignity, right. It is not that a person with a disabled is not as dignified person as the person without disability, right. It's also talk about autonomy. Understand that this is an important concept. Autonomy simply suggests that you can have your own voice, right. You can also make decision. So, it's not that someone else will be making decision on behalf of you. You can also make a decision as a human being, right. So, it is basically, if you look at the key characteristics, you will find that disability is framed as a human right issue from these perspectives, which focuses on three important points. Disability focuses, like, through the human right model, disability is framed as a human right issue focusing on dignity, autonomy and equality. It advocates for the elimination of discrimination. It advocates for the inclusion of disabled people in all aspects of societies. So, there is a legal framework, let us say for example, UNCPR, CRPD, right. If you see, they all are talking about the autonomy, they are all talking about dignity, they are all talking about equality of people with disability in our society. So, this model can sometimes be seen as very idealistic and very difficult to implement in practical terms, right. Because if I do not want to get into the more philosophical understanding, but we all know that it is really challenging in the society in which we are living, that we can think of everyone being equal, right, because there are a lot of problems, economical, political, cultural, ethnic. So, these are the barriers which constantly cannot let create a equitable society, right. However, we can constantly aspire for, we can constantly think for a society which is leading towards more equitable society, right, more equitable societies. So, there is a focus on rights which can obscure these important discussions, such as access to health care, rehabilitation or economic opportunities. All right. So, this is also another criticism that we need to take into the account. Then we have the next one is called charity model of disabilities, right. So, this views disabled people as objects of pity, needing help, care and protection. Historically prevalent, it has been propagated by charitable organization and religious institution that position disability as a tragedy requiring compassion, right. So, this model often results in disempowerment. It reinforcing the idea that disabled people are dependent on others for other well-being, right. So, this model which is very prevalent from the very society, disabled people and able body or human exist, because it is thought that, oh, they cannot work, so they need to get help, they need to have a care, they need to be protected, right. So, it becomes like these bodies, disabled bodies becomes an object of a pity, right. So, they are seen as a misfortune, right. They are seen as if it's a bad, it's like omen, it's like curse which they are, it's like disability is a curse which they have received in this particular life. So, they are portrayed as deserving of charity and pity, right. So, this focus is on providing assistance to disabled people, often through charitable donations or welfare programs, right. And this model tries to, like, it encourages a kind of paternalistic approach, where disabled people are perceived as a passive beneficiaries, right. So, in this model you see that again the agency is compromised. The agency of disabled people is compromised. Autonomy of disabled people is compromised, right? So this model reinforces negative stereotypes. This model portrays disabled people as helpless or burdensome, right? So it fails to recognize disabled people's agency and right to autonomy and equality. So this model can stigmatize disability by reinforcing power imbalances between those giving and receiving aid. So what this model do? This model, as you see, that has potentiality to stigmatize disability by reinforcing power imbalance between those giving and receiving aid. Moving ahead, we have a minority group model of disability. So this minority group model of disability sees disabled people as a distinct minority group with shared experiences of oppression and marginalization. Like other minority group based on race, gender, sexual orientation, disabled people are considered to face systematic discrimination, exclusion, inequality. So this model advocates for collective political activism and the recognition of disability as a social identity. So the key characteristic is that disability is looked at as a social identity which is very akin to marginalized groups. So here you see that in this model, disability is considered as a distinct minority group, like let's say for example Muslim, let's say for example some other ethnic identity. They are also looked at as a kind of social identity which is very close to other marginalized group. So there is a focus on systematic discrimination. There is a need for collective political action, and it seeks to affirm disability as a legitimate form of identity and culture, right? So the key characteristics of minority group model of disability is that it endorses disability as a legitimate form of identity. It gives an identity to the people with disabilities. It talks about that they have their own culture, they have their own way of operation, they have their own way of bringing people together and talking to each other, all right. So the criticism of this model is that not all disabled people identify with a disability identity. This model may overlook the diversity of experiences within the disability community, right? As I have been constantly telling this in my previous lecture as well, that a person with visual impairment and a person with a hearing impairment have a very different way to look at the society, and society even look at them very differently. But in our society, obviously, the what minority group model of disability vouches for that they both can be clubbed under a disability identity, right? But again, you see that there is a possibility that some XYZ form of disability may not feel like vouching for that identity. They may say that no, this is not what my community is, I belong to somewhere else, right? So this is a problem we have with minority group models of disability. So the problem with this model is that not all disabled people identify with a disability identity, and this model may overlook the diversity of experiences within disability community. So it emphasizes political struggle over personal, medical or social needs of people. So it goes for more again political struggle. It does not talk about the individual experiences. Obviously, it tries to neglect medical intervention or let's say social needs of people. So this is the criticism that we have with minority group model of disability. Moving ahead, we have affirmative model of disability, right? Affirmative model asserts that disability is a positive identity, right? and disabled people can lead fulfilling, rich lives despite societal barriers or impairments. This model emphasizes pride, acceptance, and the celebration of disability as a part of human diversity. It rejects notion of disability as inherently negative or undesirable, right? So what this model affirms is that is a positive identity. It sees that disabled people can lead fulfilling and rich life despite social barrier or impairment. So disability is embraced as a positive identity. It celebrates the experiences, cultures, and contribution of disabled people. It also encourages self-acceptance and rejects pity or stigma, right? So it looks at disability as a positive things, right? It is something that positive. First time, like it's not like there are other who do not look at it, but it has a more emphasis on embracing disability as a positive identity and talks more about culture, contribution of disabled people. But again, the criticism, obviously every model has a certain criticism. This may not fully address the challenges of impairment, pain or illness that some disabled people experience. It also argues that it sometimes idolizes disability, overlooking real world difficulties, right? So these are the two basic, I found, like these are two basic criticism we can have against affirmative model of disability. But again, we don't need to forget that every model has its own limitations, right? So each model of disability offers a distinct lens for understanding the experiences of disabled people and the barrier they face. So while the medical and charity model focus on individual impairments, it evokes paternalistic or medicalized responses, like the social, human rights, minority group model emphasize the societal barriers and political experiences that disabled people encounter. And where we saw that affirmative model, it seeks to celebrate disability as a part of human diversity. Whereas we saw that biopsychosocial model offers a very integrated approach, balancing medical, social and psychological consideration, right? So there is an ongoing dialogue. It's not like I'm looking at these models separately. I just gave you a perspective idea to what this model is about, what the model look at it. But these ongoing dialogue have these among these model which reflects the evolving nature of disability studies. That's the point why I brought all these models, to understand that how they all interact and evolve together, right? So in practice, a combination of models may be applied to address the varied and complex need of disabled people and their communities. So with this, I would like to end the lecture here, and I hope that you have understood all the important models of disabilities and how they interact, what the problems they have, what are the key characteristics is, and the criticism we also discussed. All right, see you again. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.